demons, demigorgons, and demigods, and welcome to the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, coming at you once again with part 2 of my interview with Damien Moyal of Damien Done, as friends Rust, Culture, and a million other really fucking amazing bands. This second part of the episode is where things begin to get a lot deeper, a lot heavier, and a lot more interesting. In a few more weeks, my Patreon page will be up and running so we can help pay some of the bills around here, and you can get some great extras, including t-shirts, extra episodes, and a lot more fun stuff that will be forthcoming. You can catch all that on my Instagram page, which is Book of Very, Very Bad Things at Instagram.com. Without further ado, I give to you Mr. Damien Moyal on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things.
Yeah.
Just got pulled into this band because he plays guitar and he has equipment.
That's Rich Cipriano of Sick of It All.
Playing. Someone else is writing the songs and he's just writing parts to go along with them. But in a year or two, that guy will be a hardcore kid. Yeah. But at this moment, he's not. I mean, I was in those bands where I was giving, the way it is, comp or whatever to other dudes in the band, just being so just listen to this stuff. You'll hear it's there's a little metal in it, but it's kind of punk, but it's different and it's a little tougher and it's a little, and to Pantera guys.
Yeah.
The band that I was doing before I joined Culture, which we only wrote a few songs, never played. It was called Hand Over Fist, and it was my attempt to will a hardcore into being from the ashes of a death metal band. With people, with a drummer and a guitarist who I don't even think were really death metal kids, let alone hardcore kids. I think they were in this death metal band because the singer, other guitarist, songwriter guy was a death metal guy, and he needed people, so he was I'll pull in these thrash guys,
Yeah.
And then after that, I ended up with them, and it's just here, just listen to this Shelter tape and this New York hardcore comp. You'll get it. It's simpler. Dumb everything that you're doing down. And then I joined Culture, but you always have those guys in the band that are there's the dude who's I don't know, man, I just listen to Dead Kennedys, or the metal guy in a hardcore band.
Yeah, well, in 1988, I was pulled into a hardcore band, and I liked punk, but my favorite band was The Cure. And fast forward to where we're at right now, and it totally makes sense. All of it.
88 was. I don't think I hadn't really picked a team then beyond just the general umbrella of offensive, music. It was mostly 88. I was always a year younger than my class.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, me too, because of when we were born.
Right. Yeah. So 88 was when I was starting 7th grade. So I was into sort of actually that was kind of the year that I really dove into music, but prior to that, it was just rock radio, which led to Ozzy, and eventually Metallica. By 88, I had declared myself a thrasher. I was Anthrax, Metallica, Megadeth. But it was also when hardcore and punk bands started coming into my into view. From a lot of the metal magazines and stuff you'd see. I've talked about this a million times elsewhere, but the big ones were Exploited and Corrosion of Conformity.
Yeah.
Where I was those are those don't look like all the other thrash, metal release. And then I got them and I was like, oh, they're not, but they're not. Well, I like, and or the first Suicidal album. And that's kind of
right there, buddy.
Yeah, I was just noticing that.
Yeah. And we had SOD to count on too, which was offensive and also bridged the gap between between Anthrax and hardcore.
Yes. Yeah. And I had seen like the New York hardcore thing on Anthrax, like I'm the Man, where they're, I think it's like spray painted on the wall. They're sort of Beastie Boys, parody.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. And to me, it was like, I really gravitated toward the imagery of Exploited and Corrosion of Conformity in particular, and ended up with their stuff. And I liked it, but it didn't sound anything like Metallica. So I was like, well, these guys are Exploited. I knew was a punk band because they were Mohawks.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, this must be, this is just punk. And like, I was, vaguely aware of like Sex Pistols and like Dead Kennedys and shit. But Exploited was like something else. To me, they're honestly like, even though I think hardcore is still sort of like mostly an American kind of thing, Exploited's a hardcore band in my book.
Exploited and Discharge, yeah.
And Discharge, and yeah. So they, but I didn't know where to put them in the context of like still being like a thrash guy. I was just like Corrosion of Conformity. There were a lot of metal elements, but in my book, I was just like, fuck, they're terrible. Like, you can't, it's so sloppy and the recording's so shitty. I guess they're just a really bad metal band, but I love it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it is. And I sort of just tabled it, temporarily. And it wasn't until like later with like Agnostic Front, Minor Threat, New York hardcore kind of coming into my world that I understood that like all that stuff was something else.
Yeah.
But what was the point of that?
I don't know, but we're on a great tear, and what really brings it all back to what you're doing now is Corrosion of Conformity, because when Damien Dunn first started, there was a dirty, bluesy dirge, and Corrosion of Conformity, especially as they went on into the late 80s and early 90s and apexed through from hardcore punk into thrash and then into like the southern dirge metal thing, they incorporated a lot more boogie and blues.
More, but it was always there. It was
always there. Yeah.
Eye for an Eye. It was like there was always this like Sabbath. They were always paying tribute to Sabbath.
Yeah, they were Iommi worshiping the whole way. Whole way.
As a punk band, as a hardcore band, as a rock band, metal band, whatever. It was always just like various degrees of embracing their Sabbathness. Yeah.
And that's the through line, I think, into what you do now, because, and we kind of mined it a little bit and we made our way around, but we felt our way into that corner where that bluesiness comes from in the impetus of Damien Dunn. It's to me, it's apparent. It's got to be that. It's got to be that COC.
Yeah, they're a big part of like the older I get, the more I realize how important Corrosion of Conformity, in particular, because for years it was just like, without Minor Threat, I wouldn't be here, and like different bands, but like Corrosion of Conformity, like as the years pass, I just appreciate more and more like where they were at that point in my life and like what that led to and evolved to. And they were a big one for me. They were a big one that I sort of like didn't realize how big they were for a while because I was sort of preoccupied with like, the transition from Metallica to, I don't know, whatever, Killing Time with like Anthrax as some weird little middleman, but it was just like, no, but Corrosion of Conformity, like that eye for an eye and like animosity and like even Technocracy.
Technocracy's fantastic. I don't care who shits on it. I love that record.
I shit on it. Only
do you?
I don't like Simon Bob's vocals whatsoever.
I don't like the production either, but the songwriting is good.
They're good songs. It's, but the demos with Mike Dean singing are just like way better.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, I kind of overlooked them or like just didn't sort of like give them the attention they deserved for the role that they played in my comeuppance. It was like they were.
I even like Deliverance.
That's where I dropped off. I did hang in there through Blind though, which for a lot of people who like Deliverance, they're just like, oh, Blind was this weird little in-between blemish.
I liked Blind.
I fucking love that album. I love
with a bullet, man.
Yeah. Mine Are the Eyes of God. The riff in that song is just like insane. Deliverance to me was sort of the beginning of like them really going maybe a little too far down the sort of like southern doomy bluesy rock thing, and it was I just lost interest. But Eye for an Eye, Animosity, the Technocracy demos are just like were huge to me. Mm-hmm. In a way that I just like realize more and more as I age.
I think it's vastly apparent in your songwriting.
Interesting. Yeah. There is definitely sort of a bluesy, grungy kind of. I think there are every now and then I'll hear like kind of a dun, 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 kind of like accent or something that's like that does come from a Corrosion of Conformity by way of or Black Sabbath by way of Corrosion of Conformity sort of place.
Well, fuck, we figured it all out now.
Yeah, we figured out like Burn to Culture.
Yeah.
Corrosion of Conformity to Damien Dunn somehow. What else we got?
Well, we're gonna have to get back to we're gonna have to get to like troubadour songs and like slave chants, and then I think that'll be the end.
I do love, man. I love that sort of like call and response, like gospel slaves. There's McIntosh County Singers. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Man, that's like
the only reason I like the band Thrice.
Like atheist paradox is just I love gospel, like old,
The only reason I like the band Thrice is because they have a song that has slave field chants in it, a call and response field chant mixed with a very Neurosis riff and chorus on their album Vesu. I didn't care for them when they were on Sub City and then their first major label record. I didn't care about it. It was built into that whole Thursday thing that I was already out of.
That's all I figured they were. I don't think I've ever really listened to them.
There's a song called The Earth Will Shake off of the album Vesu that turned me from writing them off as another emo metal band to being this musically literate. You could tell they love Ink and Dagger. You could tell they love hot water music. You could tell they love As Friends Rust on this album. If you listen to just this album, and then they get away from it again.
Huh. Yeah, I'll check it. That was that era where we were sort of being, touted as like for fans of Thrice and Thursday, and I was just like, I don't listen to those bands. I don't want to know anything. And the more we would get compared to bands that would basically just like seal that band's fate for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, never gonna listen to that fucking band. I don't know. It was just it was a weird time, weird transition, kind of like um
You could
or
blame it on being a Libra, or you could blame it on the age group. I would blame it on the age group. I think when you grow up in hardcore and punk and you reach your mid to late 20s, you get really jaded and you're like, yeah, dude, this was cool
oh
when
yeah,
I
and we're
then.
all contrarians, like that have just been sort of like drawn like moths to a flame to this thing. So it's bound to happen. But what happened for me was honestly like uh because I think a lot of our fans in 99, 2000 or whatever were not much younger than me, but like a couple years younger than me. Um, I resented the comparisons.
Mhm.
I wanted As Friends Rust to be compared to bands like uh, Turning Point and Dag Nasty and
Yeah.
Gorilla Biscuits. And like in my mind, we were just doing like we were a hardcore band with melody. Like
Yeah.
we did those octavey things that to me were Gorilla Biscuits, but to someone a year or two younger were Lifetime, and to somebody a year or two younger than that were like
Movie life.
Fire or something. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I would start hearing comparisons like, to like, oh, you're one of my favorite three bands and or four bands and my other three are Grade and Boy Sets Fire and Hot Water Music. I was just like, fuck this, I'm out. Because nothing against those bands, they're all good band. I liked the very first Grade release when it was like still screamy, and Hot Water Music is obviously like just fucking top notch songwriters.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know one album of theirs, and it's like it's the one with Ebb and Flow on it. Flight
Yeah.
and Expression, I think, right?
Yeah.
It was when I think a lot of their early diehard fans were starting to walk away.
That
It's
was
like,
yeah.
like this is a good record. Um, and then in Boy Sets Fire, I liked the split with the Jazzman's Needle.
Yeah, I have that 7-inch. Yep.
I got that split from Conquer the World when he was first like signing, Culture or Born Again or something.
Jazzman's Needle were a local band to me.
They had, or were they? Oh,
Mhm.
nice. Yeah, so there's material from all those bands that I liked, but at that point, 99, 2000, I did not like what any of those guys were doing. I didn't like what any band was doing. And that caused me to sort of turn around and look at my own band and I was like, fuck, are we doing that? Are we doing this like, you know, you just called it emo metal, which is kind of like a pretty simple but kind of like spot on. Yeah, that weird like it's very produced. You can't even really say it's rooted in hardcore because you don't hear much of that, but it's like
It's not. It's metal with someone aping what they think emo's supposed to sound like.
yeah,
Because does it sound like Embrace to you or I? Fuck
nope,
no.
no.
Fuck no. It doesn't sound like Dag Nasty to me.
And that's what I want. I mean, it wasn't like the goal. It wasn't like something that we, wrote up on the wall in our practice spaces, like sound like a Discord band. But like, I wanted to think we were more of that than this, I don't know, like than a heavier Jimmy Eat World or something.
Yeah.
So I think it was just generational, and it kind of like yeah, pissed me off, and it kind of made me just write the whole thing off. And when I left As Friends Rust in early 2002, right before the Equal Vision thing was released, um, I just kind of was done. I checked out. I was like, whatever's happening in this scene right now is just not something I fucking care at all about. I do not care about this whole Thursday thrice glass jaw direction that everything's going. I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't care. So yeah, whatever. I just started, I don't know, smoking a lot of weed and just listening to like Jethro Tull, and I just checked out for quite a while, about 10 years, until On Bodies, which, I mean, I still listened to the shit that I listened to. I was one of those guys that was like, I just listen to old shit. The old shit's better. And it was at the time.
Yeah.
People who say that today, I'm just like, are you like not paying attention? Because there's like great shit. I think there's better shit. It's been a longer stretch of like cool shit coming out now. But there was a patch where in the early 2000s, it was safe to say that like all the new shit sucked. It just sucked. It wasn't just that I was being like a jaded old guy that wasn't like paying attention or going to shows. So who was I to talk? No, it was just really bad music.
They were trying too much to be too MTV, too like swoopy hair, Fall Out Boy, like you know. Now we have bands like Move, and and they're like a Black Power hardcore band, like a Black Panther hardcore band. Like how could that not be awesome? How could that not be awesome?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a movement now of hardcore actually becoming hardcore again.
Yeah.
Like very homespun, very, very like basement, like,
and much more diverse, much more inclusive. I mean,
Yep.
shows today, like when I do go to shows, or even when I watch shows online or whatever, I'm just like, this is the audience that I wanted to see back then.
Yeah.
Which was just a sea of white guys.
Oh, there was a band a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, they broke up, and they were on Revelation, Primal Right. They were a thrash metal band with a trans woman singing.
Yeah.
Like, holy fuck. Like, where was this? Where was this 25 years ago?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And no, instead it was just like, it was a bunch of white guys, like, putting like free Mumia stickers in their records and like writing, whole like dissertations on how this land was stolen, from the natives.
Yeah.
But they were still just all white guys.
Yeah, and unless
most part, with the exception of like you had Spit Boy and Nausea and like the Riot Girl thing that was happening, but like for the most part, I mean, it was
or Crudos.
Or Crudos, yeah. But to be honest, that's kind of what that's why As Friends Rust has always been like the band for like of all the bands that I've been in, that's my like that band has always been like my real sort of passion, because coming off of the heels of Culture or Morning Again, it was just like it was weird to go on tour and like look out and see a pretty even split. I was like, holy shit, look at all of the like women.
Yeah.
Or, like, girls, even, like it was like not just guys. And that was, like I was used to just singing to a bunch of like pissed off like dudes, white dudes.
First wave Lifetime was the first time I saw anything like that.
It's a nice feeling, man. It's a great feeling to like just like look down at like the people mashed up against the front singing every word, and every other person is like female, and I don't know, it was just like it was really kind of an epiphany. It was jarring, coming off of the heels of like a militant straight edge kind of vegan sort of thing, which was always like too limited and too, it was limited in message, it was limited in audience. And I think that's the reason like I keep coming back to As Friends Rust, or like pushing for As Friends Rust, was because like uh, we it was just, it was a very inclusive. We even had shirts that said like exclude nobody, exclude no one, because
Hmm.
we got so sort of high on that like inclusion, on the diversity, um, which honestly paled uh, in comparison to the diversity that you see today.
Yeah.
There are so many like people of color, or like trans people that are just, it's a much more dynamic, diverse scene today than it was then. And back then, all it took to feel like you were really breaking the boundaries was like a few like women up front singing the lyrics, and you were like, "Look, we're not like, you know."
We're not jocks anymore, or
Yeah.
we, you
Um, yeah, I kind of and even in culture, as one of those bands, I think I always had like ebullition envy.
yeah.
You know, we were friends with Earth Crisis, and I love the first couple of EPs, and like there are like very good bands in that sort of world. Um,
I even like the asshole bands in that world. I liked Vegan Reich.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a whatever. But I knew. I mean, I all things considered, looking back, like I didn't spend that much time in that sort of like militant straight edge vegan world, but the little time I did spend in it, I spent sort of not liking how small it was,
Hmm.
and how off-putting it was, and how like, I mean, I can there's only so much I can say to that effect as a guy who was writing about like killing hunters and shit, but like
Sure.
um I still did sort of align myself. And this is again sort of the issue of like, envisioning your own band to be something other than what other people envision it to be. I saw as Friends Rust as Turning Point Dag Nasty, when other people saw it as Grade, Hot Water Music, Avail, whatever. Um, I saw culture as Downcast,
Oh yeah.
Groundwork, or like, you know,
Some thence forward maybe in it too.
yeah, yeah. And and other people, where on the spectrum, or the of vegan straight edgeness, we were sort of kind of in the we were, I think we presented as maybe a little to the right of Chokehold,
Hmm.
and a bit to the left of Earth Crisis.
Yeah.
Um, but people saw us as Vegan Reich, Day of Suffering, Abnegation, hardline band. And I,
I never saw you guys as a hardline band, because I always saw you more as being like Chokehold, like a little more to say, a little more intellectual, a little less pro-life. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not pro-life at all. I would
yeah.
actually say that if anything, we had a lot less to say than Chokehold, because to be honest, like at least in the Born of You kind of era of culture, we weren't very political at all. Most of the songs were about personal relationships, or like heartbreak, and or just very self-deprecating sort of, again, the I'm a piece of shit theme.
But
Um,
where I'm getting
with a
with that
couple of
though,
vegan straight edge songs for good measure, right? Because uh,
where I'm getting at with that though is that you guys weren't out there like, like Earth Crisis, Vegan Reich, Raid. Those bands were hardline. Like they were members of like ALF. They were pro-life. They were very, very a little too creepy for
they
me.
were religious.
They were religious.
Yeah, there was that whole weird like Rastafari, Islam sort of questionable views on homosexuality and
Yep.
abortion, And we were always very progressive in that respect. Like as culture was always, pro-choice and we were just vegan and straight edge.
Mhm.
But the flavor, of the era was chuggy, palm muted chugs and Slayer leads,
Slayer leads, yeah.
threatening, biblical sort of sounding like lyrics. So yeah, we had some of that shit, and it really sort of pigeonholed us as a hardline band. And like, I didn't even know what that shit was. I mean, this was like, I wasn't even like really on the internet. I didn't have email. I didn't fucking know shit. I was never one of those, back to me being a bad hardcore kid. I was never a guy who did a lot of like mail ordering or collected a lot of zines or anything. So like my frame of reference was pretty small. What I knew was that like there were bands out there also flying under the sort of militant straight edge vegan banner that were whatever hardline is. And the only thing that I knew that was like different about them than us was that they were like pro-life and anti-gay.
Yeah.
And I didn't like any of that. So I kind of made it a point, much like I would years later, when I would be bucking against the Boy Sets Fire grade hot water kind of comparisons. I was going to the other end of things with like, I'm like, oh, I'm going to show them that we're not, a day of suffering or whatever. Like, which is also kind of why when Morning Again started, one of the conditions was that we wouldn't sing about veganism or straight edge.
Mm.
So the 7 songs that I was on had nothing to do with any of that shit. It was much more, for better or worse, like kind of just straight out of like the kind of like more aligned with like the Ebullition catalog, because that's kind of really more what I listened to.
Yeah.
At the time,
Oh yeah, I was a Heart Attack fanzine guy myself. If it didn't come out at that time, if it wasn't on Ebullition or Gravity Records, I was probably not that big of a fan of it.
Right. Yeah. I was we sounded very East Coast, but my kind of the messaging was coming from a much more sort of San Diego kind of it was just a lot more like I liked that whole sort of like DIY, include a zine with the release and like liner notes about every fucking song and kind of thing, because it was like what I liked about other bands that I was a fan of. I liked opening something up and like learning something. I mean, in retrospect, it was like, you realize like, wait, these are like 17-year-olds trying to teach me something about a subject that like I haven't read much on. But whatever, it really like, I liked that vibe. I liked the whole like, let's expose people to issues that they may not be aware of, like even if we don't know shit about them.
You're ready for the next through line then?
Yeah,
because I got it.
You do. You've been pretty much on so far. So let's hear.
The San Diego hardcore scene, very spastic, also included, like a lot of synthesizer work. They would pepper it in,
Yep.
and then the farther it went, the more you got into like from Swing Kids to Locust, a lot more synthesizer. And then what you do, there's a lot of electronics involved. So there's your next through line.
I'm going to level with you. It's not as strong as your other through line.
Okay.
No,
I thought I was onto something. Don't shit on me.
Only because I kind of like tapped out before or right around Swing Kids and Locust.
Right.
But ultimately, we're talking about people who are like, with a few year tolerance from the same generation who came up on the same shit. So, sooner or later, those influences that are like exist within them on a cellular level are going to bubble up to the surface.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, especially like taking into consideration like how disparate everything shot off from there, because you have everything from, the Locust to Blink 182 coming out of that same pocket of an area. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was a sonic stew happening there that it could have gone any of a few different ways, and a lot of it really did suck, but
Right.
at least they were headed somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think at some point or another, like, these are the elements that you're composed of. And you can only hide from them for so long, or you can only, uh, you know, you can only put on a bandana and some camo shorts and do that thing for so long, or do the swoopy hair, this is what I kind of thing for so long. Ultimately, the truth will out, right? Like,
Yeah.
you, if you, if you're like anchored to all of this by memories of like road trips with your family, like where you're all singing mamas and the papas songs at the top of your lungs, like sooner or later, one of those hooks is going to manifest in your, post-hardcore, post-punk solo bedroom project. Now that you've done your whatever, metal, metallic hardcore shit, and you did this other stuff and whatever, like eventually those things, yeah, they're just going to bubble to the surface and manifest, and we are who we are,
Yeah.
uh, it's kind of like a lot of people are shocked sometimes at like people who were in bands that were um, apparent, like to the bands that seem to be very, very progressive, very leftist, very radical, like radically kind of anarchist or whatever, whatever. You have all of these bands now where like there are members of those bands that are kind of like uh, being exposed as sort of being kind of right wing, or being like, oh shit, that guy's like, he's totally a Trumper and he was in this fucking band of all bands, right?
Yeah.
Um, what happened? What was the change? I would argue that there was no change. I would argue that like that conservatism was that Mamas and the Papas song on a road trip. It was just like
It
was
was there.
a matter of time before it bubbled up to the surface. Like they were just putting on the, they had the like DIY sort of screen printed patches sewn onto their, hoodie or whatever, and they did the like they played, you know, um, anarchist like, squatter like punk kind of the nausea thing for a while, but eventually they became their dad.
Yeah.
Because they were just going to anyway, sooner or later.
Yeah, I mean, we have examples of that. I mean, Nerve Agents were supposed to come out with reissues on Revelation, and it didn't happen because their drummer or bass player, I forget which. Well, it couldn't be their bass player; it was their drummer. Was just hammering out with this Joe Rogan, alt-right, Alex Jones, wackadoo, Trump-loving nonsense. And they were supposed to do a tour. They were supposed to reissue the albums. They pulled the plug on the whole thing because this guy, the optics on them was all of that.
Yeah.
And
I don't even know if that's right. To be honest, it's like we don't all have to believe the same shit, right? Like if it's I think the metrics or the like where it is that we determine that like these beliefs are actually like harmful, I think for some people like the slightest whiff of them is a deal breaker, and for other, I think, you know this is shit we tolerate on other levels from like relatives or whatever. So like, I don't know, there have always been, I would say more so in the 80s and 90s, just meat-headed ignorant like bands and hardcore punk.
Oh yeah.
If anything, we're in a better fucking place now. I don't think it should be a deal breaker that like, oh, they're kind of conservative. Like they can be kind of conservative. That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree. I don't agree with fucking 108,
Right.
right? But it's all right. They have a different take on it. They have a different whatever. Like give them when it becomes hard. I mean, when it's like just straight up, racist or bigoted. But the thing is, now we're just gatekeeping to the point where we decide that like, well, no, they're not like blatantly racist or bigoted, but they do support this politician who peripherally supports this, which perpetuates that, and like we just, connect, maybe over connect. But remind me where we are right now.
No, well, we were talking about how the politics, the meat-headed politics, kind of always existed, and we're in a better place with it, but
like all right, so John Joseph, right? We'll just go with him since he's sort of the quintessential like right, Joe Rogan kind of meathead in hardcore right now. Like that dude, well, all right, for starters, he didn't exactly ever present as anything else, but like let's say he did, right?
Yeah.
He's just, he's gonna write a book about how like, eating meat is for pussies because he probably grew up in a house where his dad told him that a lot of things were for fucking pussies.
Yeah.
Right? We're just like, to some extent, our destinies are sort of just determined. I think that there's a certain degree at which we can sort of deviate from, what we grew up kind of under or understanding or having sort of like modeled for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's limited, I'm not exactly like my parents, but I'm a lot like my parents.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And there are ways that like I kind of always was, and there are ways that I sort of pretended I wasn't for a while, until eventually just sort of like drifting back and just being like, yeah, I guess I kind of like that shit too, or like want to emulate these characteristics too, so yeah, when I see those members of those bands that everyone is just like completely in disbelief that somebody from that band could be this, could become this guy, I'm like, all right, but this guy is 40 something years old. The guy in that band was like 17, and he was in that band for a year.
Yeah.
And to go way back to an earlier point in this conversation, he wasn't even a fucking hardcore kid at that point. He got pulled in from the punk or the metalhead in the other guy's biology class because he simply had a bass guitar.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very believable that guy is now like Instagramming MAGA shit. So I don't know. I had the good fortune of like, in spite of like my militant vegan straight edge years and whatever anybody like decided that meant about me, of ultimately like having grown up with parents who were like very liberal.
Yeah, me too. Hippies.
Yeah.
My dad was in Vietnam, but after which he just wanted to grow his hair out and give peace a chance. So I kind of lucked out in that regard.
Yeah, mine weren't like super hippie-ish, but they were very just like you don't make anybody feel unwelcome. You don't discriminate against anybody for like any differences. And um that was just the backbone of kind of my so yeah. Ultimately whatever.
Yeah,
Those
pretty.
dudes just being what they were gonna be the whole time. And honestly, it shouldn't be that outrageous that somebody who was in any kind of like dogmatic, self-righteous band of any persuasion turned out to be, you know, super conservative, whatever. Especially like, I mean, I'll, you know, maybe not at the inception, but straight edge very quickly became a very, you know, uh, conservative
Well,
source.
I used to say that, that X was only 4 hatch marks away from becoming a swastika, you know?
Yeah. It's
And
not, yeah, I mean, and it's not true of all of straight edge by any means, but it's
no,
true of a lot of it. A lot of it, you know. Um,
and especially like, there was I don't know, I was never straight edge. I always liked the music. I was always a vegetarian. But it seemed to me that a majority of my friends who were straight edge back in those days came from white upper middle class upbringings with uh, very little problems. There were only 2 or 3 of them that came from a place more akin to me, like growing up with very little financially and growing up around a lot more violence and things like that, that
yeah,
stuck to it. So it almost seemed convenient unless you came from a place of where you were like escaping something horrible. And
right.
those were the straight edge kids that I really, really kind of I was drawn to because they were.
The problem is they all claimed they were escaping something horrible. I mean,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
go, any interview you read with any straight edge member of any straight edge band, then or now, it's the same sort of like, well, I grew up in a family where like you know, I had these addicts in my family, and I just knew I didn't want to be like that because it was in my DNA, and I was like bound to be an addict. I don't know. It just seems like it's just the script you're given when you like first claim
yeah,
one. And I think a lot of people just mindlessly just sort of like regurgitate that script without like knowing if it's even true.
yeah,
Um, I didn't have addiction in my family.
yeah,
My situation was a little weird where like at the time that I claimed straight edge, which was after joining culture, because when I joined culture, that wasn't like a require the requisite. They were all straight edge.
yeah,
Um, I was smoking cigarettes when I tried out for culture, like at practice, Um, it wasn't until joining the band and spending like a few months in the band and I was already like going to meetings. I had already been like institutionalized and sort of told that I was told I was an addict.
hmm,
I was in fact an adolescent with you know, a, a shitty home life for a couple years that ended up leaving home a little bit early and was in the system.
yeah,
Um, and what they do is, you if you're not going to go to a foster home or a group home or a shelter or something, like you go to an institution, and a lot of them are dual diagnosis. So it's like, all right, the requirements are that like you have you're dealing with some sort of emotional or mental or behavioral, thing,
hmm,
uh, and some sort of chemical abuse or dependence. And I think that like I ticked that box, But in retrospect, like I ticked that box because it was abuse. It wasn't like I wasn't.
Dependency.
It wasn't dependency. I was an adolescent, an angry fucking adolescent who didn't give a shit. And like you make bad decisions because, well, you're an adolescent, and like that's what adolescents do.
Yeah.
But also, I was like not at home, and I was like, reveling in this like sort of like freedom of just being like out on the street, doing whatever. And also I didn't have a healthy fear of consequences or appreciation of being alive.
Mhm.
So that all lent itself pretty well to like just making like especially dumb decisions and doing especially dumb shit, which I did, which a lot of kids at that age do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I graduated high school in a juvenile detention center.
Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I mean, it's just a rough age, right?
Yeah,
But
it really is.
it's very easy when you get into those places for somebody to tell you and convince you, and they did with me.
And you probably graduated at 17, right?
No, I actually, without knowing, and I don't know how I didn't know or how I didn't figure this, but like I went to go start my senior year, and they were like, "You're not a senior. You didn't go to school last year." So I was like, you know, still in 11th grade, but by then I was like just turning 18, and I was able to just like withdraw and get my GED.
Yeah.
But during those times that I was in like the system, um, yeah, I was told I was an addict. I was told by people who knew nothing about me other than the fact that like, you know, I liked to get fucked up sometimes, that like I was an addict and I needed to go to meetings. And if I ever drank or smoked anything or snorted anything again, I'd be dead by the end of the night because that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just like a junkie who's like, you know, uh, whatever, like you know, one bag away from dying. And I believed it because I don't know. I was just like, oh shit. I'm like, all right. And also like, I mean, meeting shit. Talk about the gravitas of like hardcore and straight edge and stuff. Like that's got nothing on like NA meetings, man.
Oh
Like
no, not at
really
all.
pulled into that shit. That was my scene
Yeah.
for a minute. And I was convinced, it was like that was my thing. That's like I had to go there and smoke cigarettes and eat like stale donuts
And
and
drink terrible coffee and say, keep coming back. It works if you work it.
yeah, thank you for sharing. And
Mhm.
like I was like it became part of my identity for like a couple years there, where like I was just like, you know, so anyway, I joined culture. I eventually like claimed straight edge. And it wasn't until like much later that I kind of realized that like I was sort of duped. Um, I don't remember how this ties into the whole thing about like every straight edge kid having the story about how like their family, is a bunch of addicts, so they knew that they were never going to do that. But like, it's sort of the same story, except the family member was me.
Yeah.
It was just like what I was told. And yeah, years later, I realized like no, I'm not an addict. I was just like somebody who liked to get fucked up because I was angry and I was pissed, and I just like didn't have much reason not to, you know. And
See,
sure, I was maybe a little bit depressed, and I may have had a little bit of a death wish, but I was still like just fucking 15. I was like scratching the surface. I wasn't.
I mean, that just goes to show that NA is no place for a person who's not an addict. And I
No.
can vouch for that because I was an addict, and in NA, you're either supposed to be there or you're not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid fucking around, maybe you just need to like get some structure and take a break.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
But the thing is, you end up, or at least in my case, I mean, I ended up in these places where, like, because one of the requirements was a history of drug abuse or dependence, um, you may just be somebody there who ticks the box for like drug abuse, but by the time you leave, you know, you're yeah, it's a dependency issue, and you're an addict, and you're court ordered to 90 meetings in 90 days, and
Hmm.
sponsor, and you get fully just completely sucked into this whole culture of like that just like tells you that you're 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 an addict.
Yeah, you get indoctrinated.
Yeah, very quickly, very easily, especially at that age. And what's funny is it's people who don't know shit about you who are like telling you that very quickly, very readily. I mean, I remember the first time I was institutionalized was like a it was like a crisis center, and I got brought there like really late at night, and they must have woken this guy up, uh, the psychiatrist, the doctor who like had to come to this place in the middle of the night to like review me as I was checked in. And this was just this like vile old pink angry man who like was upset at having to like, put shoes on and like get out of bed and fucking drive down. And then he gets there and he's looking at like a 15-year-old with like you know, half of his head shaved. I had like one of those like the slab, like the mohawk that's just laying down,
Yeah.
to one
Yeah.
side. And I remember sitting with this guy for maybe 5 minutes. And I never saw him again in the 45 days that I was at this place. And in those 5 minutes, he insulted me. He told me that I looked like a wild Indian, you know? Not in a cool, joking, trying to bond with the Utes kind of way. Like he was just
Yeah.
like insulted me and walked out of the room. And before I knew, and I was on suddenly like prescribed all sorts of like a whole cocktail of shit.
Hmm.
And I spent the next 45 days just zombified, and like I don't remember my mom coming to visit me, which she did every week. And I remember like not being able to move my jaw or my tongue because like they put me on what's it called, stelazine,
Hmm.
uh, related to like thorazine. It's in the same family as thorazine. Um, and sometimes you just lose control of your like jaw and your tongue, and like you need a side effect pill that they forgot to prescribe, cogentin, I think it was called. So like I was just on all these like antidepressants, sedatives, mood stabilizers, whatever, all prescribed to me by this like just horrible, awful fucking pig of a man who like sat with me for like 5 minutes in the middle of the night and just hated me before he even got there,
Yeah.
you know? And that 5 minutes set the trajectory, for the next couple of years, because from there, I was not only told that I was whatever um, behavioral or emotional or kind of mental things, I was written up as being, but an addict, because you know, I don't know, like drank and ate acid and like,
Yeah.
did a few lines or whatever. Like I was an addict.
Fairly,
And
and it's all fairly innocuous. It's not like you were out like trying to score heroin or Oxycontin
it's
or anything.
dude, Miami, early 90s, it's like par for the course. It wasn't uncommon. I mean, people are bored and just pissed off because you're just so isolated and fucking sticky and sweaty and hot. And it's just what happens. It's a violent place with a lot of access to just dumb shit, and people make dumb decisions down there. It wasn't really very uncommon.
No.
But I had done a little shit, and then like because of that, I from there went on to more rehabby places, and there were the meetings that I was sort of like ordered to do, and I had a sponsor, and if you have a sponsor, I mean, you better be an addict if you've got a sponsor.
Of course, yeah.
Well, like I was just fully fucking into it, and so I think now I'm figuring out how this ties back. When I claimed straight edge, I had the backstory
Yeah.
that like, every straight edge kid needs,
Oh.
and sometimes they pull from they're really reaching, like, oh, I had a great uncle that was an alcoholic and I never met him, but I sure heard stories, and I knew as a 3-year-old that I didn't want to ever be like that guy whose name I can't remember, and then sometimes that's the story. But for me, it was just like I was told, I mean, like I have to stay clean. So it was kind of easy for me, and
Yeah.
I really believed in it. I really believed in it. I believed in it after I sold out. I still was like convinced that that's it. I had made a choice that was going to put me in the grave in a year or two. And it wasn't until like a couple years had passed and I was still alive where I was like, kind of doing all right. I don't even really go out and like drink or do anything. I just I smoke a little weed and I just sit at home and like watch, whatever TV and shit. That I kind of realized that like, man, I think I was fucking duped. I think they lied to me. And they really like kind of fucked me up in that way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary because I mean, anybody that like it can be your first time walking into a meeting. And if you make the mistake of like introducing yourself and talking for a couple minutes, that's it.
Yeah.
You don't even get to like figure out whether you're like really an addict or what's really going on. Like you're in.
Yeah, and it's like it's a poor excuse for going to therapy and figuring out if that is indeed your problem. I
Yeah.
mean, when I landed my ass in NA, it's because I'd already OD'd.
Yeah.
There was a whole different bag of wax going on with me, but I can't imagine at 15 years old just fucking around a little bit, ending up in the same rooms I ended up in my late teens and early 20s, like talking about doing some really vile shit to get heroin. Like they're night and day. They're night and day.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me it was really, I mean, it was fucking around a little bit. I mean, it might have been fucking around a little bit more than, some of my classmates who like, had whatever, they'd sneak a couple of beers every now and then or something, but like it wasn't again, it wasn't that uncommon. It was just like if you're like not living at home and you're sort of just like out there like making dumb decisions because you don't give a shit anyway. Yeah, you're gonna try some shit.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, especially at that age. Drugs are fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are,
Oh yeah, listen, cocaine.
I was never a user to a point where like they weren't fun and they were really a problem. I was just like I was at an age where like I had nothing to lose. I was impressionable, and if something was in front of me, there was really no reason to like turn it down and just be like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do this? But it wasn't what it was made out to be. And I think that's kind of fucked up. And I harbor a lot of resentment toward that whole like recovery culture, the whole NA kind of 12-step thing. And I've come pretty close to, or maybe I have like offended, some friends who are in recovery, who are clean, who have been for a long, long time, and who swear by those programs.
Hmm.
And, like religion, it's like, look, it's not for me, but if it improves the quality of your life, then like, by all means, whatever it takes.
Well, I can tell you from my point of view, it doesn't insult me because you weren't like, it doesn't sound like you had a dependency issue. You weren't bottoming out. You weren't, like there's if you are hopelessly embroiled in the obsession of addiction, and there are other people who are also hopelessly embroiled in the obsession of addiction who are no longer using, whose advice do you want? You're going to want theirs.
Right.
Where are you going to get that? You're going to get that from an honest experience in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. But to take a 15-year-old kid who's just fucking around, smoking some weed, doing a line of coke, maybe tripping, doing ecstasy,
Yeah.
that's not a drug habit. That's somebody who's fucking around and maybe needs to be steered in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. Yeah. But it is troubling how readily people in those rooms will tell you that it is the same thing.
And they will.
It's troubling that there's no screening, that there's no like, let's really talk about this. I mean, why, somebody should be asking like the frequency or the like, like the mindset that you were in when you were doing this shit. Like, because I think they could have determined pretty easily with me that it was just like, yeah, you know what? No, you're just an asshole. Like,
Well,
get out of here.
there's no that the only script that anybody in those rooms goes by is you're escaping reality. You have an addiction. You need help. You need this room. You need this guy. You need to cycle your numbers. You need your serenity prayer, and you need the big book.
But that's really reductive, right? Because
It is.
every single person sitting at a bar right now is escaping reality.
Yeah. I'm drinking wine right now. I'm
How many
escaping
of them
reality.
Yeah, I'm drinking wine right now.
Yeah.
I realized a couple years ago this is my podcast thing. I'm like, I just get wine drunk.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can pretty much delete the first hour of this conversation because it was like taking a minute. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's fucked up how like readily they just hand out that label,
Mhm.
and that's made me very distrusting of like the whole 12-step thing, because I think that like they don't care whether you are actually an addict or an alcoholic or whatever. They want you in the room. I can't really figure out what the agenda is because there's not a whole lot of money to be made.
No,
But
there isn't.
you're in the fucking room, man, and they really want you to like believe that you need it, and that's a little, not to oversimplify or whatever, but that's sort of a little culty. It's that whole like, we need you to need us.
Yeah.
That
And
is the payoff for us. It doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to be your belongings or your paychecks or whatever. We just like, we need you to need us.
and that's misery loving company.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what that is.
Yeah.
And I mean, how that led you to straight edge makes total sense. It makes total sense. But what finally led you out?
It does make sense in the sense that I kind of went from believing that one sort of institution was keeping me alive to believing that another. Like I stopped going to meetings, but I started being a straight edge kid, right?
Mhm.
And all of those things, like every straight edge kid will tell you, saved their life. In huge air quotes, right? Saved my life.
Yeah.
I will say And I'll get back to what led me out. But I will say, like, I do genuinely think that in a weird way, culture did save my life. Not in the sense that it saved me from like dying of, of some sort of like of an overdose. Um, Culture, I think, just changed my life because before that, I was still just like a neighborhood uh, asshole on the street, like kind of like dodging cops and truant officers because I wasn't an adult yet and I didn't want to be at whatever place they had stuck me, foster home, group home, institution. So I just kept running away and jumping on a bus and coming back to my old neighborhood and hanging out with my friends until I had to like jump out their window and like run, through the streets of Miami to like till it was safe. So that wasn't going to go anywhere good, you know. Um, and it wasn't until joining this band that like actually recorded and actually played shows out of town, not far, Tampa, but I was like, I'm in Tampa playing with my fucking like hardcore band. That's insane. Like we're not just playing a show in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. Like I'm in Tampa. This is like what it's like to be a real band. And then like, the next thing you know, you're playing Chicago or Syracuse and a label wants to put your record out. And you're like, now a European label wants to put your record out, like bring you to Europe to play shows. That changed everything. I mean, otherwise I just would have been like some dude, just, some North Miami Beach, I guess at the time it would have just been hood rat. Like, that just would have, I just would have just kept getting in more and more trouble until the trouble was like, I would have been too far gone to come back from it,
Yeah.
It would have just become me. So culture did sort of save my life, but not in the way that I think a lot of people are like, straight out saved my life, hardcore saved my life, whatever. Or maybe exactly in that way. I don't know. What led me out of it? I have poor impulse control, and there was one night where I rolled up to a friend's house and I jumped out of a car that I was in to see if anybody hanging out at the house wanted to join us to go to some diner to eat. And sitting on the porch of that house was, I don't remember if we were still dating at the time or if we were recently broken up, but like a girlfriend or ex-girlfriend was sitting there and she was drinking something and looked really nervous. And I also knew her to be straight edge, like I was, right? And I was like, what's in the cup? Nothing. And I like grabbed it and I smelled it and it was just like fucking just beaming vodka. And I don't know why or what happened at that moment, but I just pounded it. And that was that.
And that was the end.
That was it. I ended up just walking home. Actually, and on the way home, I stopped at a convenience store or party, whatever. I've been in Michigan too long. They call them party stores here, but a liquor store. And I bought, I don't know, bottle of something. And I just like went back to my room and got shit faced with, and then one of my housemates who had also been in culture with me and would later be in As Friends Rust with me was like, what are you doing? And I told him, and he was just like, I can't let you go down by yourself. So the two of us just got like super drunk that night. It was actually kind of fun. But that was it. And then, I did the thing that like most straight edge kids do in the beginning when they sell out, where I made kind of a spectacle of myself and I got like really drunk for, year or two, until it all sort of self-leveled, and then that was it.
At least there wasn't the whole Damien broke edge, like we're all going to ostracize him from the scene fist fight thing. That seems.
Oh, there was a little bit of that.
Oh, okay.
There were some cities that on As Friends Rust tours, I was a little bit worried about playing. Some cities on the itinerary where I was like, I don't know if Syracuse is a great idea.
Well, Syracuse is especially, Guav straight edge weapon lives there.
Yeah. But it was fine. We played a Hellfest. It was fine. Actually, I believe it was Wilkes-Barre. In my mind, it's always been Wilkes-Barre. I think that same festival that we were talking about at the top of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Although I feel like maybe somebody else in As Friends Rust recently told me they think it was a different city, but I think it was Wilkes-Barre. I was in the parking lot and I got surrounded by like 10 or 12 kids who like had a bone to pick with me. Now, selling out, one of them had culture lyrics tattooed on them. They were super upset.
Oh, dude, that is definitely Wilkes-Barre. That's definitely Wilkes-Barre because I know the dude with culture lyrics tattooed on him, so it's here.
Okay, yeah.
I wasn't aware that occurred because I really couldn't give a squirt of piss about what straight edge was about.
I mean, I wouldn't say that they like came at me like they were going to jump me or anything, but they definitely came at me, and it was like I was cornered and kind of encircled, and I don't know. I just kind of was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. If those lyrics mean something to you, then what's the problem?
Yeah.
Bundled with, why are you getting lyrics that a 17-year-old who had been straight edge for like 3 months, wrote in the fucking first place, tattooed on you?
Yeah.
Kind of argument. And yeah, there were a couple of other situations in other cities that were like a little hostile, but it seemed to blow over pretty well. I think that honestly, look, a weird saving grace was maybe that I think that a lot of those angry straight edge kids also had a soft spot for As Friends Rust.
Yeah.
So it was like a weird bind that they were in because they were like, oh, I want to give this guy like a hard time for like, selling out and like, betraying his like culture ethics. But I also really want to sing along to these like As Friends Rust songs. So it was like a weird time. That was also kind of, I guess, 98, 99-ish.
Yeah, that would have been around
when culture ended. So it would have been like 99-ish. Yeah.
And this area was just rife with that stuff right around until they all hit 21, and then it all ceased to be, with a few exceptions. I know a couple of guys who are my age who are still carrying that, and if that's what makes them tick, that's great for them. I like the guys, but
I respect it, man. I don't have that kind of discipline.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm a 12-step guy and I drink because I enjoy drinking.
Yeah.
I'm not in a gutter. I'm home.
The important thing, and I think that's honestly the metric. That's the thing. Like, if you're not in the gutter, is it a problem?
Probably not. But
are you getting fired from your job?
Oh no.
Is your family leaving you or being taken away from you?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You've got like a job and a family and a podcast and
Mm-hmm. Now, when I just had surgery on my foot, I can't ever take a prescription painkiller again, because then I could see some shit hitting the fan.
Like a little too much.
Yeah, well, then yeah, like I told a doctor not that long ago. I mean, yeah, you could prescribe me that, but it's more than likely that you'll read about me in the news in a month. So
Yeah.
he's, okay, I'll just give you the Tylenol 800. I was like, that's the move.
Yeah, luckily, like, um, those anytime I've been prescribed anything for, something medical or whatever, they don't really work for me.
Oh,
Um, Percocet works great for the pain, but I hate the way it makes me feel. Makes me feel sort of like sick. Vicodin, I feel fucking great on Vicodin. Does nothing for my pain.
yeah.
Nothing at all. Luckily, 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, you know, that's it. 4 Advil is like, that's all I need. And
Yeah.
it doesn't pose the risk that, like, any of those other drugs do. So, like, I've been pretty lucky about that, where, like, they prescribe me that shit and I don't even take it because I know that it's like, it's not going to do one of the two things that I needed, to do.
Yeah, I was one of those weird ones. That stuff didn't even affect me the way it's supposed to. It made me speedy. It made me clear-headed. I'm a weird drug addict. You know?
Yeah.
I used to be able to like do heroin and go to work and be the best guy on the job site, like by a landslide.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's freaky. But being out of all of that now, and you're making music in a milieu that there's no politics, like none. You don't have to adhere to this, that, or the other thing. Now you just have to make good music. I mean, imagine what that would have been like back then, not based on your lifestyle choices or what you decide you like to eat. I'm just making art for the sake of art, and I'll be judged on it by the validity and, talent that it took to execute this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I think we're all in a far better situation as far as that's concerned. Like imagine existing as Friends Rust, existing in a situation where that was never even taken into consideration.
Yeah. I don't know that it would have been possible then, because I think, well, for one thing, I would have been too young, I think, to be able to make the kind of music that I'm making now.
Mm-hmm.
Also, or on the other hand, you could argue that there were bands doing that then, bands that didn't have any sort of like uh, convictions or lifestyles that they were sort of like building an identity around, that were just making like music and uh,
Well, I think a lot of those bands that weren't adhering to the accepted lifestyle choices then, they were almost celebrating the opposite, because you had everybody from Ink and Dagger who were wearing their chemical love on their sleeves.
mhm,
Their nickname was Drink and Stagger. Um, and Hot Water Music, who those guys, they just partied, and there was none of that other stuff tied to them. But they were far and few between.
yeah,
Everybody else had to be codified or paid by getting surrounded outside of festivals in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was all part of it. I mean, I don't know. I think one way or another it worked out. Like I was convinced of something that I don't think was necessarily true, but it led me to a band that ultimately, I think the big like benefit that I got from culture was just being like sort of pulled beyond my neighborhood. Even just moving over the county line from Dade County, because I was like the one Miami kid in the band, and everybody else was in Broward County. So like just moving 20 minutes north, new city. It just kind of yanked me out of that sort of like, I was very much stuck in my neighborhood and kind of wallowing in like my home life, and whatever led me to this situation that I was in, where I was like uh, in the system and in and out of places that I just would keep leaving. It was like this weird little, I was just stuck in this kind of quicksand. So culture um, expanded my borders, I guess, by uh, a guy in Detroit putting our record out, like guy in Tampa wants us to come play there. Guy in Europe wants to put our shit out. Uh, that wouldn't have happened had I still just been kicking around the streets that I just kept like running back to, even if they were uh, ironically like the same streets that I was kind of running away from. Um, but I just kept coming back to my neighborhood, and yeah, there are a lot of people down there that it's a bit of a black hole. It's easy to just kind of get sucked in, and I don't know. I think the real benefit was, yeah, just getting being in as much as like it was still sort of a local band at the time. It was like a real band in the sense that I had never been to the studio before. I'd never played out of you know out of town before. And I think that just like was really eye opening, and it changed everything, and it made me kind of like want more um, from life.
Hmm.
Uh, I did have some of that modeled by my parents. To go back to that whole thing about ultimately sort of becoming your parents in the end, anyway. Um, my parents were both European. Like my mom was grew up in Holland. She was born in Mexico, but she was Dutch, but born in Mexico, but grew up, went back to Holland, grew up. My dad was French and like moved here when he was 18-ish. So they kind of had a little bit of a different worldview, and we traveled a little bit, even though there wasn't money when I was a kid. We would just travel to places that you didn't really need money to travel to.
Yeah.
A lot of like South and Central America, and I was maybe that was the instead of having the dad that was like whatever is for pussies, and becoming John Joseph.
Hmm.
um, I had parents that were kind of liberal and kind of had this uh, different perspective, and maybe I was just bound to sort of emulate that in the end, and I think I have, and I'm not ashamed of it.
No, nor should you be.
Yeah, but I was definitely making a pretty good attempt at resisting it for a while, and I
Yeah.
think a few more months or another year without something like culture coming along, and I probably would have just been fully. I would have succeeded in resisting it, and it would have just been the whole like, man, what happened to that guy? Like, how did he end up in fucking prison? Like, you know,
Get swallowed up by the streets, and that's that.
yeah, yeah. So I'll always have a connection to culture for that reason, especially. Uh,
It's pretty great though that you get to go back through all of these major bands in your life and not have that, you look back with a little bit of trepidation, like, oh God, like I did that. you know, there's still you still look at it with some reverence.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I don't have any regrets uh, at all. They were all amazing experiences. I linked up with like some really incredible uh, musicians and songwriters and people whose like perspectives kind of informed mine, and I learned a lot from.
And
Yeah.
then, of course, there were the bands that you were in and then bailed on, and then they did things. But it
Oh,
seems
all of that. Yeah. Shai Hulud, Bird of Velloman, Morning Again. Yeah, there was
yeah,
do you remember that movie something about Chuck? Good Luck Chuck,
Good Luck Chuck. Yeah,
right? Or like he's the boyfriend before the guy you end up marrying, you
yeah.
know? Um, yeah, yeah, but that's fine
I'd be okay with it
because
too.
I mean, honestly, in a lot of ways, like the inception is. I may not have enjoyed like the most successful periods of some of those bands, but I was there at the inception, and like it was that's an exciting time to be making like designing the first shirts and screen printing them yourselves and dubbing the demo, from a
Yeah,
dual cassette deck thing at the merch table at a show, and like a lot of great fucking memories, and for most of those bands, I mean, uh, I I think they upgraded, you know. Well, Shai Hulud definitely fucking upgraded. I mean, I love the demo. I'm really proud of the stuff I did with them, but they got Chad and they went on to just like be like a really defining sound of that era of hardcore, and I don't think anybody really did what they did at that time better than they did it.
hmm
Um,
yeah. But I think that had more to do with was it Matt Fox,
yeah,
the guitarist? I mean, like their guitar work was what really set them apart. I think.
yeah, that is the thing. That's why they've been able to like succeed all these years. Like
With different vocalists every
different
time.
vocalists, different drummers, different rhythm guitarists, different bassists. It's as long as Matt Fox is there, it's like the songwriting is intact and it's got that flavor, and that's yeah, that's great. I haven't. I mean, I'm not super well versed. I have a pretty good knack for uh, sort of not really paying attention to bands I was in once I'm not in them anymore. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's ego or competition or resentment or just like I barely gave a shit about that kind of hardcore when I was playing it with that band. I'm definitely not going to keep up with it now that I'm not. You
yeah,
know, I honestly think it was mostly that. Like, I liked what we were doing in Shai Hulud, but like, I wasn't really listening to that outside of the band.
yeah.
Once I wasn't in it anymore, there was just really no reason to listen to it. Definitely the same with Morning Again, Bird of Velloman, any of those bands.
Yeah. But
But
yeah, now you get to redefine though, because your time was so brief that you're not intrinsically tied to Shai Hulud, Bird of Omen, Morning Again. I mean, people know you were in those bands,
right,
but you were in them before the big record. You were
yeah,
in before Revelation got a hold of them, before this one got a hold of them. Mostly Revelation, 2 of the 3. Um, so you get to kind of curtail that whole recognition with it and
right,
do your own thing.
yeah.
And that's also another harbinger for the success of Damien Dunn, because there's no expectation was put on it other than it's going to sound like Damien singing,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think of those three, like Morning Again is maybe the only one that anybody really associates with me because the stuff that I was on did kind of get out there more.
Yeah,
The Shai Hulud demo was like buried for years before it finally came out, and then it like barely came out. Um, Bird of Velloman I never recorded with.
yeah,
The first release, they credit me for a bunch of the lyrics and my artwork's on there and stuff, and I named the band or whatever. Morning Again too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty much sort of not really part of that story, and that's yeah, it's been good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but it's cool. I'm also proud of it though. I'm proud of being there at the beginning of all three of those bands. Those were all three bands that did like really cool shit, you know.
mm,
Um, and contrarily, I was not there at the beginning of Culture.
yeah.
You know, I came in later. I was the third singer, um, and then the fifth singer.
And then the fifth singer, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Uh,
But you're the person everyone ties to that band, you know. Yeah, I can't even name the other singers.
well, in the very beginning, it was Rich ended up singing. Well, they had this guy Mark Mitchell was going to sing in the very first incarnation. He decided not to go to the studio the day that they were recording their first demo slash 7-inch, and so Rich ended up singing, playing guitar and bass, uh, and then Josh played drums. So Rich was sort of the second singer. The first recorded singer, but the second singer. And then I came in after that. And then I left, and Mark, the first guy, came back for 1/7-inch.
Mm-hmm.
And then I replaced him again. So he was, I guess, first and fourth, and I was third and fifth. uh,
What an incredibly incestuous and strange scene we come from. It's beautiful.
yeah, yeah, very weird. Very weird.
So I guess the next thing we have to look forward to from you is this new album, and that's probably not going to come until 2022, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if we're even done mixing. Yeah, we'll probably finish mixing. I don't know, February or March or something.
Right.
'Cause we're sort of chipping away at it. A couple. The songs are all written, but we're mixing like two songs at a time, kind of in between. James Paul Wisner, the same guy that's worked on a bunch of that other stuff, in between his other projects, he's sort of squeezing in a song here and there. So there's that. But the other thing would be in early January, we start tracking uh, the new As Friends Rust album.
You got to be fucking kidding me.
No, no.
Has anyone mentioned this? Because I didn't know anything about this.
I think it's come up here and there, but not in a wide.
Like
wide
I'm chewing my nails here. Like
yeah. We've been uh since doing the first reunions in 2008, we've been like, let's write new shit, and we've over the years sent a lot of stuff back and forth, and finally a couple years ago it was like, all right, we need to shit or get off the pot. We have like a lot of demos. Let's sift through them. And last year we uh, voted on, I guess, the selection for the LP, and then I think we must have felt like really accomplished just for having done that, and we just didn't do anything. And after that, so we've had this like Dropbox folder of like the demos for the 8 songs toward this new LP just sitting there, and it wasn't until a couple months ago that we were like, all right, we need to record. We have to actually do this. Like we're not done. Just because we picked the songs, you know. So now, yeah, now we're fully in the mode of like tightening up the songs, and we have studio time booked for early January to start tracking the drums, and then after that, everything will kind of follow.
God, because the last thing I heard from As Friends Rust was, you know, you guys came out with the, you know, the Black Lives Matter T-shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that I bought that, And before that, it was you guys came out with greatest hits package vinyl, the yellow.
No, we had 2 songs last year.
Oh yeah, that and the 7-inch.
Yep.
I'm sorry, the 7-inch that came out on that European label. You're right.
Yep. Yeah. Those were our first. That was our first new material in. Well, as a band in 18 years, but for this lineup in about 20 years. Those 2 songs. And they were really well received. We were we were pretty excited. We were like, "Oh shit, people, you know,
People don't forget.
people don't forget." I think it still felt like us, to them. They kind of felt like there were a lot of like,
It was smart out like the
we didn't
vocals
miss
were
a beat.
very smart alecky on them.
Yeah,
Like it
or
felt
so
like
we didn't miss a beat.
yeah, it's like you didn't go anywhere. It's like the Equal Vision EP, and then those 2 songs, like there wasn't really too much of a disconnect, conceptually speaking.
Right. Yeah. And what's cool is this lineup is the second lineup, which is to me sort of the real As Friends Rust. The coffee black era is what I always call
Yeah.
it. So that wasn't the lineup of the Equal Vision or one. Well, it was myself and Joe, who's responsible for a huge part of the As Friends Rust sound, like those guitar leads. We were on those, but
Mm.
but the rest of the band from the second lineup was not. And now that's who we are. And it's interesting to see the second lineup writing stuff that falls right into play, like makes complete sense, coming after the stuff that succeeded them.
Yeah.
So we were really happy with the reception that those 2 songs got, and now this album I think is going to be like kind of more of that. So we're pretty psyched.
Now, you probably can't say who's going to be putting that one out, but I'm sure it's not just going to be a little offshoot label. I would imagine there's going to be bigger heads wanting a piece of that action at this point.
It's I don't know. Maybe whatever's next, if there's something after that.
Mhm.
Although at our rate, that may take like another 15, 20 years. But we shopped the idea around. To be fair, these labels were hearing from a band that had been mostly inactive, for 20 years, and we weren't willing to share any demos.
Mhm.
So I think there's only so much credibility that they're gonna kind of, um, charitably kind of give you. So it was a little, it was a little tough when we were shopping it around, but in the end, a label came around that we were like pretty excited about. That is, you're based in Europe, but like doing pretty awesome things. So we were just like, yeah, fuck it, we're good. This is kind of perfect.
I think I have an idea of who it's going to be, but I'm not going to say because I don't want to be wrong. That's if I'm right, that's going to be a pretty big coup because it seems like the best hardcore albums are coming out of this area of Europe, in Germany, and man, it's a great time. It's a great time again, like you were saying before. I mean, bands like Be Well. Be Well put out one of my all-time favorite hardcore albums, and it's by guys my age who were in viable bands 25 years ago. Like,
Yeah,
it's an amazing time for you guys to come back.
yeah. Isn't that cool? Isn't that like kind of weird? I mean, I would say there's still a generation of 19-year-old hardcore kids that probably hear things like Be Well or whatever new As Friends Rush shit, and they're just like they still hear just like dads playing hardcore, but like fine. there's no way they were going to accept anything coming out of like any kind of salt and pepper, like uh, dudes, and that's fine. But like all things considered, it is pretty wild to, bands didn't have a very good, the track record was pretty abysmal for like bands disappearing for more than 10 years and then coming back with an album. And it was always just super diluted, just bullshit. Right.
Yeah. Reunion show nonsense.
Yeah. Really phoned in. The Be Well stuff is like really energetic, really well played, really like, intense.
Lyrically prescient,
Yeah. If anything, like to me, sometimes it's almost like too intense. Like the lead guitar, they're just leads everywhere. It's like, oh my God, these guys are they're definitely not being, 40 something, 50 something year old, like lazy, kind of just dialing it in, kind of cashing in, kind of they're all in.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And it's cool because that's only maybe the like second generation of hardcore bands of people that age. And I would argue that the first generation didn't do a very good job keeping it up.
No, I don't think they did.
Of like, I don't know, Off, maybe.
Well, Off was pretty good. I won't lie.
Good, but yeah, I think aging hardcore kids is a pretty interesting thing, and it's weird because you still feel sort of the same age, even though you've got a mortgage and kids and whatever. You still sort of feel like the same like teenager, and you don't really know that much more.
No,
so you argue that like it's legitimate on the grounds that like we're just as ignorant as we were back then, so we should be afforded the same like hey, I promise I'm just as dumb as I was then. Yeah, man, it's weird. It's weird to be. I'm 45 and I'm not at all. You're 45. Yep. We're by no means the old guys.
No, not anymore. Not anymore.
Not anymore. And I think a lot of those guys are making really good music. I think it's fair that a lot of the like younger kids won't give a shit about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. There's a lot more stuff going on at that level, and by that level, I mean like when people are all in relatively the same age group and don't have the same considerations or obligations or responsibilities, kids or whatever. They are much more the backbone of that scene. They're the ones that are going to see each other 3-4 nights a week, sometimes at shows.
Yeah,
because they can. I can't go to fucking hardcore show 3-4 nights a week. I can barely go to 3 or 4 hardcore shows a year.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've actually gotten flack from people like, "Oh, dude, that's not your scene anymore. You don't put your time in. I don't see you at shows." It's like, no, because I have work. I have kids. I have a life.
And also, we don't know yet that precludes us from being like viable members of the scene yet. Like this is still new.
Yeah.
It's still new for there to be like a generation like ours that can't make it to shows all the time.
Yeah.
So
we could be setting the new metric and we don't even know it.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe the hardcore scene maybe it just exists over like Zoom calls and like Hate 5-6 videos, and they all have it wrong.
Yeah. Well, eventually it's gonna have to give one way or another. So I hope it gives in our direction.
Yeah. Or whatever, man. I don't know. There's all this pressure to like even still like be hardcore and still be like, but I don't know. I mean, I like playing that music. I like listening to that music strangely more now than ever.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever.
I don't think. I mean,
It shows every night, then I guess I'm just not enough of a hardcore kid.
I don't think there's any currency in that anymore. Anyway, I think that died.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The pandemic was the great leveler, because for 2 years almost, it was just like none of you guys were at fucking shows.
Yeah.
So now what's up?
Yeah. Where's your scene
Are
now?
you more hardcore kids now because you haven't gone to a show in almost 2 years? Like, of course I am. Cool. And of course I am too. Fuck you.
Yep.
And I'm also like, why am I like trying to convince these kids that I'm still a hardcore kid? I don't know.
Well, now I just go to shows that I really want to go to.
Yeah.
It used to be I would just go to whatever one was happening when I was a teenager. It's like, oh, there's a show tonight. A show. Didn't matter who was playing.
Yeah.
And we'd all play that game where if we didn't like the band, we were this.
Now I'm the guy that's like, shit, Integrity's playing in Cleveland 3 hours away.
Let's go.
It's my kid's birthday. And don't get me wrong, there was a part of me that was like, could I go after his birthday party? Like, I could just jump in the car with my friend and like haul ass to Cleveland. But yeah, you don't, because, whatever.
Yeah.
Someone will have recorded it, or you just will forget a day or two later, more likely.
More than likely, yeah.
Because I don't really watch live. I mean, there are a couple, like, I've watched like there's a Gulch set that 856 did from a This Is Hardcore or something that I've watched a few times, and like I've watched a couple of like Turnstile sets live, and it's cool sometimes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, they're right. You got to be in the room, and I'm right that like I can't really make it. So
yeah,
I don't know. In the meantime, I listen to a lot of fucking new music, a lot more than other people my age. So I feel like I'm doing my part in sort of like keeping up, and I definitely am not doing the whole like, anything after 1997 is bullshit.
Yeah.
Hardcore died when I stopped going to shows. No, it didn't. It's alive and well, and it's pretty fucking great.
That was my beef with that American Hardcore documentary, where at the end of it, the dude's like, and then hardcore died. Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Really? Okay, honey.
And wasn't that only like 85 to 90 or something?
It was like 85 to 89, 90, yeah.
Yeah. Nah.
Yeah. And the dude ended up saying something really, really transphobic at the end of it about RuPaul walking through a hardcore show on the Sunset Strip in high heels, and he said, and that's when I knew that's when I knew hardcore was dead, and I wanted to reach through the screen,
wow,
and grab the dude by his face and just smack it off the pavement. Huh. Like that really got said. It's like, you piece of shit. I don't want to be associated with something like that.
And granted, the 80s was a great time for hardcore, and it was sort of like the genesis of so much of that shit. But like, when you look at like kind of the bigger bands of the 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of range.
No.
The range that was there was basically just like regional. It was like you had regional sounds, but like the range, I mean, like, I don't care if it's Minor Threat or the West Coast version, Uniform Choice, or even like Negative Approach or whatever. Like, there's only so much. They're not all the same, but they're, it was a pretty small circle sonically.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that the 90s, as much as it gets made fun of for the Jenkos and bandanas and, chuggy, whatever, the 90s, especially like the first half, were really innovative.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, from all the hardcore stuff, starting from Quicksand, Shelter, all of that kind of shit, to like all of that kind of like outspoken sort of new age sound, you know, bands like incorporating sort of like hair metal kind of cock rock, like guitar licks and influences and Swedish shit. And
Oh, and the amount of bands that were actually inspired by Jane's addiction in the hardcore scene,
mhm.
it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable the amount of bands that actually like were inspired by like My Bloody Valentine, Jane's Addiction, the Smiths.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what made it so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like
People, I think the 90s are sort of given a bad rap because like when people think of 90s hardcore, they do just think of like they think of like Earth Crisis.
mhm.
It's just camo shorts, bandanas, and like you know. But there was so much going on in that first half with like Mean Season and Split Lip and Endpoint, and like there was just so much weird,
Oh yeah.
weird shit. I mean, the first half of the 90s were just weird, and that's what I loved about like coming into hardcore during that era was like, you know, I didn't know what to make of it.
Oh yeah, even like going to like some of the more widely attended like pseudo hardcore shows almost I would call them, because like you'd go to see Life of Agony right when River Runs Red came out, and it'd be them and Sheer Terror on tour together with a bunch of more regional hardcore bands opening. Like there's not one band on that bill that sounds remotely alike.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's that was just the magic of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
It seemed like the goal at the time was not to sound like anybody else. You
mhm.
know, everybody was trying to really carve their own niche. Like there was not a whole lot of like, oh man, I love Those Who Fear Tomorrow. Let's start a band that sounds just like Integrity.
Mhm.
You know, there was a lot of like the way innovation is supposed to work, where you just sort of incrementally improve upon or tweak elements of something that came before you. There was a lot of that, but I would say that like it wasn't even necessarily incremental. Like it was big jumps. I mean, the leaps, you know, like the the jumps from like SSD to, you know, yeah, Mean Season are like, how does that happen in the span of that, you know, of a handful of years?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
Snapcase, and again, like everybody just sees like it's just funny, you know, because everybody has frosted tips and they're wearing giant shorts and like running shoes, but like listen to what they're playing though.
Yeah.
Like, why is Snapcase writing that kind of shit in like 93, 94? Doesn't even make sense.
I think that's what's happening now again. I really do with these new crops of bands, these younger bands. I mean, some are trying to emulate the 80s, of course, but I think there's a lot of very innovative music right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, again, you're picking a great time to bring it back, because you're going to be more at home now than you probably were then.
Yeah, probably. I mean, and if nothing else, there's none of that like that shit, you know, that I was complaining about earlier happening. There's
Mhm.
not in the throes of a Thursday thrice glass jaw grade boy sets fire thing, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Or maybe you will get famous.
maybe no, I don't think anybody our age has ever got it.
No.
I think yeah, I don't think that's ever happened.
No, you need time to tour.
You need time to tour, and then even if you can tour, then everybody sees that you're just a bunch of like graying, balding dudes with like dad bods, and like no, now that they see you, they're sure that like you're not the band for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird thing. I don't know. Then again, like, well, they have the benefit of having like a legacy, but bands like Propaganda or Bad Religion keep like putting out like great shit. I mean, Propaganda arguably just like keeps getting better and better.
Well, yeah, they keep getting more metal.
Yeah, much more metallic, much more just meaner and faster and heavier.
Hard to believe that's the same band that wrote How to Clean Everything.
Right. Yeah.
Without John K. Sampson, he's not there anymore. But
Was he the Weaker Thans guy, the bassist?
yep,
Yeah.
he was the sappy, gooey center at the heart of an otherwise very political band.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think there is there's a facet of hardcore now that's a lot more DIY, a lot more, they'll put their shit out only on tape. You cannot stream their shit. Like maybe you can find it on Bandcamp, but and that's cool. But those also tend to be the bands that are really aping like 80s shit.
Yeah.
So those are the people who I don't think are going to give a shit about a new As Friends Rust record. But in all fairness, like I don't really give that much of a shit about what they're doing. Like I've already heard, they're doing it well, but like, come on.
Yeah, we were there when it happened. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah. And in a few years, they'll be doing something else.
More than likely.
Yeah.
So I guess to kind of take everything home and wrap it up, because Dad's got to go to sleep, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
Because it's almost 2:00 in the morning. Holy shit.
Man.
We've been doing this for a while. I guess what would there be left for you to leave us with? Just your parting words.
I don't know that I have any. I don't know. I'm still I never stop being completely kind of like dumbfounded when I get invited to be on a podcast or when I talk to someone who's actually heard Bridge Burner on Body shit.
Yeah.
I've been saying this, I think, since I was younger and more active and still like fully in it, but it's such a weird and special thing that we've sort of carved out for ourselves, where yeah, you can just be some dude with a microphone and you write a few lines and that shit just it travels. It just kind of reverberates around the world, and it's always like really interesting to see like where it landed and who reaches out because it meant something to them and they want to talk or interview you or learn more about a song or a release or kind of understand it better, and or when they identify with it on a personal level, especially when it's something that you thought when you wrote it was so subjective that nobody could identify with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then come to find out that like a lot of people identify with it, even if they're interpreting it slightly differently.
Yeah.
That shit is just, I guess that's part of like, waiting in line. That's the part of like standing in that line for 90 years or whatever. That's that when I do go through that door, ultimately that just kind of vaporizes me and my whole history with it. That will have been, there'll be more history to vaporize,
Mm-hmm.
because of things like that, because of those connections, because I mean, there's nothing wrong with like a simpler life in a smaller world, but like it could have easily just kind of, stayed in the neighborhood and not written anything or recorded anything that reverberated anywhere and landed anywhere. Um, and that's cool too. If anything, maybe I would have found, you know, I would have found, I wouldn't rely on that validation to sort of like um, give me a sense of sort of self worth. But this is where I am, and that's what's happened, and it's like it's pretty fucking cool.
What
Weird.
you've accomplished echoes now. It has its own life.
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. It's cool, and it just sort of makes me sort of feel like it's bizarre because I have like those artists, that did that for me, and it's weird to think that I'm one of those for somebody else.
But you are now.
Yeah.
And you have been for over 20 years.
Yeah. And I don't know if the future shit will continue to reverberate, but I'll still be at it. So, I'm hoping to just end up maybe like some of those older artists who just keep making shit to the point where no one even pays attention to it anymore. But it'll still be there if anyone does do a Google search or a go down a Spotify wormhole. I'm gonna keep doing shit, I guess. I don't know. It's at the time when those forces within As Friends Russ were hoping to be more commercial and more radio friendly. The problem, the rift, was that like there was never any part of me at that point that had ever wanted to make a living off of music.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like music was just something I fell into. It wasn't really me. And now I'm kind of reaching a point where I'm just like, now at 45, I've finally kind of out loud acknowledged that like I always have to be making music.
Yeah.
I'm always listening to and or making music. And at the time it was just like I wasn't. I was a dude who, drew or painted or wrote or like wanted to do some other sort of designy thing, or I don't know. But music wasn't it. And I don't know that I want to make a living off of it now. I like the stability that I have now, and that's a pretty risky, road to go down. But
yeah.
But I have sort of realized in my 40s that it's a much bigger part of me than I kind of had acknowledged until very recently. Very recently. All that history, all those releases, like that was all sort of a fluke in my mind up until just a couple of years ago. I was like, oh shit, it's not just a fluke. It's not just something I fell into. It's something that like I need.
Yeah.
And I think when I was just a vocalist, it was easy to sort of write it off as like something accidental. But now I'm at a point where it's like I'm writing the music, I'm programming, stuff. I'm, like I guess I'm, more in it than I realized.
Yeah. Now it's intrinsic to your being.
Yeah.
And fuck, that's incredible. This has been an incredible conversation. My God, I've never sat with anyone for almost 5 hours on my podcast.
Well, I will tell you, man, I go like every single person I've done an interview with is just, this is longer than what we started at 9.
Yeah.
So we're going on 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going on 5 hours. What the fuck? Yeah.
This will be a two-part episode.
Yeah. They end up being 2-part episodes. They're never this long. This might be a 3. Yeah.
But par for the course. My soft kill interview was 3 hours and change, so
yeah.
Makes sense. But I'll wrap it up here because I'm gonna crash on you. But I really appreciate you coming on here and being so forthcoming and having such an excellent conversation with me.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this was great. I never know how it's going to go, and yeah, it's once you get past the music stuff that it starts to get kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It was interesting to talk to somebody else who's been, in those programs and sort of indoctrinated into the same sort of belief system, and also walked away from it and kind of just been like, if I just do this, I'm fine though.
Yeah.
Maybe there's other shit you can't do, but like, it just shows that it's not so binary. It's not so like black or white, right?
No, it's not codified.
No. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride. Sounds like you've had one too.
Yes. It's been a wonderful, crazy, ridiculous life.
Yeah.
And I'm only halfway through it, as are you.
Yeah.
All right, my brother.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And maybe I'll talk to you again soon when the next album's coming out.
All right. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, brother.
Cool. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been part 2 of my interview with Damien Moyal of Damien Done, As Friends Rust, and half a dozen other incredibly important hardcore bands. This one was a real pleasure for me, as I've been an incredibly big fan of everything he's done thus far. It's great to actually interview someone that you feel a true connection with, and that's what we had here. I really, really, really appreciate the time and thought and courtesy he gave to us, as he is one of my all-time favorite musicians and just an incredible guy. I'm so lucky to be doing this. I say that often, and I mean it every time, but it is my distinct pleasure to bring conversations like this to you folks week by week. I know this one's a day later due to the holiday, but I'm glad you stuck around. I've been Peter. He's been Damien. You've been fantastic. And I can't wait for you to hear what we have coming up next. From 3:33 a.m. Studios, this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Good night, everybody.
Go dark with me. Won't you go dark with me? We'll fold ourselves into each other's arms till we're nullified. At the end of a world that can never seem to get it right. And we'll melt into each other's hearts as we liquefy. If we can't have tomorrow, let us go tonight. Go dark with me. Won't you go dark with me? Go dark with me. Won't you go dark with me?